Hey guys, we're just setting up all the speaker privileges here, and we'll jump in a minute. Cool. Looks like we've got everyone. Amy, I think you just managed to connect as well.
Hey.
Yeah, I think it would be. How are you getting on? Yeah, I think it would be useful. Obviously, to take a quick overview of everyone we've got sort of in attendance today. Thank you all for making it. Excited to dig in. Yeah, I mean, Amy, perhaps you want to kick it off and give quick context on sort of where you sit with FTX.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Pierce, thanks so much for having us on. I wear a few hats at FTX. So I lead our venture fund. It's a $2 billion crypto and Web3 fund. I also spend a lot of my time in consumer internet, particularly gaming. And so, we have FTX Gaming, which is our white label tech product for gaming companies, and have been speaking with some of the biggest studios in the world as their thinking around Web3 games have been evolving.
Awesome, thank you. Jiho, maybe you could give us a quick overview. We'll just run through.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Super excited to be here. I'm Jiho. I'm a co-founder of Sky Mavis. We are behind Axie Infinity and Ronin Network. Yeah, I grew up as a gamer and a collector. NFTs was the first thing that ever kind of caught my interest in crypto. Luckily, found out about it through CryptoKitties. And yeah, I've been addicted and enchanted ever since. So yeah, thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Gabby?
Hey, thanks, Pierce. Gabby Deason here, co-founder of Yield Guild Games, or YDG. We are a gaming guild of Web3 gamers and enthusiasts, and I started in NFTs in 2018, started playing Axie Infinity in 2020 when it started blowing up, and now we're building a network of players around the world who level up their Web3 skills primarily via gaming. And yeah, building up a guild network, started in the Philippines, now we're across Southeast Asia, India, LATAM, in Brazil, Turkey, Japan, Korea, and elsewhere. Thanks for having me here.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, Brooks, do you want to jump in and give an overview?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Brooks. I'm a creator of NOR and Consortium 9 and one of the sort of thinkers behind PlayFi.
Excited to dig in. And last but not least, Aaron, perhaps you want to give a quick overview.
Yeah, thanks, Pierce. My name is Aaron Barschmidt. I'm one of the co-founders of Laguna Games, and we are building Crypto Unicorns, Web3 entertainment DAO. I've been in the space pretty much daily since 2017, and late last year kind of finally combined my passion for gaming and the blockchain crypto space with the pivot of Laguna into building a Web3 game. Happy to be here. Excited to chat.
Awesome. And then, yeah, on the Delphi side, we've got the gaming team here. We've got Jan, Ryan, and Jeremy as well. But yeah, thanks for giving some intros there, guys. Perhaps we can kick it off. Amy, we'll sort of start with you and what you're seeing at the moment on sort of the game side. Obviously, sort of recent market downturn. We've seen some interesting, mercurial reactions from some sort of mainstream gamers lately. Obviously, with the Ubisoft stuff, and also recently now with sort of Dr. Disrespect's Midnight Society. So. Would love if you give an overview on sort of the latest you're seeing, that kind of divorce between all the exciting stuff that we're obviously working on the crypto side, but also then the mainstream games as well.
It's a big topic, so maybe what I can do is highlight a few themes that I'm seeing. Is so I mean, obviously, like I would say that everything's happening reminds me how early we are right now. So, and there's so many parallels to some of the other big gaming trends as well. Like for example, when mobile gaming really first launched, with Web3 games, it felt like there was certainly a lot of hype that could the bull market. Obviously Axie really led the way there in terms of bringing on like what was like a lot of mainstream attention into this category. Suddenly gaming companies were like, oh wow, like not only are there millions of people interested in this, but also there's, so much there's actually a lot of revenue and profits to be made in this category as well. You're essentially increasing the TAM um, of the gaming space with Web3, combining Web3 elements. Lots of debate and discussions ensued around what is Web3 gaming. Is it a brand new monetization model? Is it an extension of free to play games? And what genres is it most effective in? How do you have sustainable games, right? There's definitely a lot of Ponzi games out there. There's also actually like very thoughtfully integrated uh, tokenomics into games. I think we're pretty early on that path still, and we have yet to see, I guess, a second game so far. I mean, unless you like count Steppen, reach sort of like the millions of people like in reach, after Axie. So I think like we're generally all super early. Then there's definitely good amount of FUD in the market around players' reactions to NFTs, not understanding it, being rug pulled. It is a reflection on like the broader industry's like issues around security and just like the average like a lot of these crypto products really being made for like a pretty crypto native audience still, but it has resulted in obviously like a lot of questions and vocal kind of animosity from like a minority of players, I would say, and particularly in the West, that has led to a lot of the, certainly starting from the big gaming companies, but down even like smaller studios hitting slow down on like their Web3 games launch plans. In the meantime, like still dozens and dozens of studios in build mode, like because great games actually take like years to build. And so for example, we know there's dozens of amazing games being built right now, but just aren't going to launch for the next couple of years, right? Like, and a lot of those games are actually in Asia, Korea being one of them. Um, and so I think that net is like you see like Minecraft being Microsoft being like the latest, I would say, platform to put some restrictions around adding Web3 into the games. I think it's as much of a legal rationale as much as like a kind of like a fear of reaction from players. And I mean, the way that I think like Microsoft had positioned it was a bit of like a philosophical piece around is this fair, are NFTs like exclusive? Well, it's kind of all depends on how you design them, right? And so I think that like large publicly traded companies have a lot of legal considerations in doing anything crypto, and that's also driving that. But yeah, I mean, like net bottom line, like we remain as bullish as ever. We actually from the beginning, like thought that we're at the beginning of this journey, and we continue to be really active.
Awesome. And yeah, Jiho, curious for your perspective, obviously having led the charge on sort of where things are at currently, and kind of how you guys are thinking about things moving forwards.
So yeah, we're at this transitional period, right? Where at the beginning, nobody cared about what we were doing. We were totally ignored. And then it was like if anyone was watching what we were doing, they were kind of ridiculing us and not taking it seriously. The recent backlash is proof that we're now entering the phase where we get actual pushback and bans from the establishment, right? That's just part of a movement graduating to the next level, right? And I think it's super instructive. I think it's a great sign of adoption, to be honest. And yeah, we remain excited as ever. I think that there is going to be this huge debate around the sustainability. And one of the things, or one of the models that it reminds me of, is everyone thought that Facebook was a horrible investment, right? In 2012, I bought Facebook at $17 or something after it crashed from the IPO. I think it went down like 60% in a week, and everyone was saying Facebook, all it does is grow, all it does is get users, it doesn't make money, right? I think that's a lot of the sustainability debate in NFT gaming or Web3 gaming can kind of be framed in that way. Yes, we have prioritized, and I think it's actually the right model to prioritize growth in the early days over monetization, right? Sustainability and monetization are actually quite similar. What people are trying to do, right? Like people were saying, oh, like Axie should implement ads, right? Ads are the future of Web3 gaming. Like, have people not seen The Social Network? Like, these people sound like Eduardo Saverin trying to sell ads for Facebook in 2003. So, right, like it's really key to just prioritize adoption. And then, if you have attention, which is the ultimate currency, there's so many different ways to turn that into a sustainable ecosystem long term. We're working on stuff like that really hard at Axie, right? With Origin, we have this crafting system, which is giving me Piers, I think you're into Diablo, right? So like Roger Cube flashbacks, right? Where I actually think that there are so many ways to balance these digital economies, and traditional games are super instructive, right? Because there are these black and gray markets for these traditional games. People are burning tons of digital currencies, right? Gold, whatever, gems, and I think it's the next stage is just Web3 game designers picking the most effective syncs and looking at the data, right? Like if you look at some of the surveys, it's like gamers prefer, what do they prefer in terms of spending gold in these digital economies and gems, right? They prefer live ops events, right? Where you can get limited edition things such as cosmetics. They love crafting systems, right? So I think the next stage is just about implementing that. But I also think that the whole debate around it is totally reminiscent to people trying to force revenue growth on Facebook at a super early stage.
Interesting. And then Brooks, I'd love if you could maybe give us an overview of the sort of PlayFi model that you guys are sort of pioneering here as well. It's a kind of different approach to sort of monetization and building around games, and it's certainly something that we've been enormously excited about at Delphi. So we'd love if you could give us an overview on that side.
Yeah, the basic top line is don't necessarily take critique from gamers as being something where they don't understand crypto. I think that the challenge becomes that they actually understand a great deal. The world of video games and gamers is incredibly sensitive to any type of monetization and how that sort of promise early on, as once we were told, don't worry, it's just horse armor. And then a few years later, we have Diablo Immortal, where people are spending more than the lifetime earnings of the average human on gems in order to have the most powerful character and be able to win. The sensitivity to in-game purchases, the sensitivity to financialization in the gaming world is not without precedent to be worried about. With PlayFi, we take a very different tactic. We look at the world of crypto and we take a look at last few years of crypto games, DeFi, and we ask, why can't we actually utilize crypto for what it's strongest with, which is the DeFi side of things, the finance side of things, the ability for it to play as capital does, as not directly an instrument of investment, but one of speculative excess, where it can actually drive value and be able to be traded globally amongst people who want to play that game. And we do call it that. We call it our meta game. On the other side, it can be used, if done correctly, to then make games themselves essentially free, actually free. And that's, to us, the PlayFi model. It operates like you would say, regular sports operates, the way soccer or football or basketball or baseball or even professional lumberjacking. They never actually monetize within the game itself. You don't ever see Messi walking in with, shoes that have rockets on them, or, bicyclists who have giant jetpacks on their back. These competitions aren't monetized inside of them, Now, outside of them, they're monetized to death. FIFA leaves no dollar unspent, but even they have never actually stepped in and allowed soccer players to sort of monetize what's on the field. And we think that model actually gives us a chance to pull in all the excess money that we're leaving on the table with traditional gaming that crypto has shown us is just out there waiting for us to take, without necessarily impinging on gameplay itself, without actually affecting the sport of it, giving players the chance to have that high skill exceptional moment that they die for. And that's essentially the principles behind PlayFi.
Yeah, super excited to see the project evolve. Highly recommend everyone checks out Nor. It's super exciting. Aaron, then would also love to hear from you on some of the things you guys are doing with crypto unicorns. Obviously, PlayFi model seems super exciting, and we're definitely eager to sort of support and see how this model evolves. But I guess on the side of things, with crypto is still very much in the game, which is the route you guys are going down. Would love if you could give us an overview of some of the things you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, taking a step back, the large AAA studios are going to be the last to enter this market. They were the last to enter free to play and the most hesitant to move into that space. And Amy kind of mentioned that, right? This is very reminiscent of the early mobile days. They have the most to lose. So it's not surprising to me to see these kind of announcements coming out. I'm finding and seeing a lot of interest from smaller free-to-play mobile developers who are reaching out to us, and I know peers in the industry, because it's nearly impossible at this point for a mobile studio to kind of break out. That market has become incredibly red ocean at this point, and you're kind of stuck between either finding a publisher or a path to raising enough funding to finance a very significant, sizable kind of marketing budget. And so I think there's this fatigue amongst game devs at this point in trying to run the LTV versus CAC equation, right? And that really drove a lot of our pivot to the space and kind of turning away from the opportunities at WB and really wanting to, put us in a position where we could look at, okay, what new tools do we have to build experiences that are going to drive and kind of motivate players? And I find the space to be, there is no roadmap. We're way out past the edge of the map. And everyone at this point is running experiments in real time to see what, to Gio's point, like what will be the path to sustainability in this, in this industry. And, with crypto unicorns, we're very focused on building an overall ecosystem around kind of this core farm sim loop, where the farm is kind of the engine of the overall game economy, where obviously it leads to the generative breeding of new unicorn NFTs, and you produce equipment, materials, and crafted items that over time will be very useful along with the unicorns in the various battle loops that we're putting out. And so, we're excited to be one of the early people in this space, very inspired by, obviously those that have come before us. And I look at the future as being very bright, despite this kind of early moment of, hate that the space is kind of getting. It does seem like we're a bit in the trough of disillusionment, but we've seen this pattern before, and I see it kind of repeating. Ryan Watt from Polygon Studios says it kind of best, like Web3 games aren't necessarily going to replace all types of games. Generally, new platforms, new monetization models add to the overall industry, as Amy mentioned. And so I think it's going to be most competitive with free-to-play monetization models, and I'm already seeing studios in the space adapt free-to-play techniques. And I'm taking a bet that we're going to eat a chunk of that space because I believe that players at the end of the day would prefer ownership over not having that. And again, I think it will eat a chunk of the free-to-play space and grow the overall industry.
Awesome, super interesting. And then, Gabby, I want to hop to you shortly to get sort of the player's perspective with the scholar side. But just wanted to see if Jan maybe had anything to sort of add following on to that. Obviously, spends a lot of time in the trenches, helping sort of tinker and design these models. So it would be cool if you got anything to share there, Jan.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so like some of the, I guess, issues we've kind of seen have been the double-edged sword of having massive liquidity across a lot of these assets immediately, and so I think part of the difficulty is that it's actually really difficult to balance these economies early on because of that liquidity, and it's at the same time what really brings a lot of users on. And so the issue is that a lot of elements of the economy haven't really been built out, but you have kind of widespread liquidity for all of these assets, and so initially you kind of have you end up having a bit of a mismatch from supply and demand. And so initially, the assets that are generally consumed there aren't that many of them yet, and so you have the demand coming in from new players and from speculators alike that really drives the value and the attention for these assets up, and so that kind of then incentivizes these loops where people kind of go out of their way to farm these assets, and then you have a situation where, because the economy isn't really as fleshed out, where you don't have the full sinks that you eventually will have, the supply side kind of gets blown out of proportion. And so in the same way that the liquidity enables the speculation, which causes prices to really go up, it also enables, it leads to an exacerbated move in the other direction. And so one of the, like, what this really boils down to is the initial kind of access drives a bit of over financialization. And so one kind of component we're thinking of is does it make sense to potentially limit some of these consumable assets early on in terms of limit their transferability? So part of the crux of the issue is, with widespread transferability, there has to be appropriate demand, otherwise things kind of trend in one direction. So early on, before a lot of the facets of the game are fully built out, I think there's a decent argument to be made that these assets should be limited in their transferability, because not only does that kind of reduce the reflexivity, but it also reduces the amount of kind of speculative extractive attention that is driven to these resources and to these games. And so in the same way that the speculation kind of blows everything up, it causes the move down to be much worse. And so by not necessarily making those as transferable, you really kind of reduce the reflexivity, so limiting the exposure of those assets to those that are actually only playing versus those that are speculating. And then it's kind of thinking about tokenomics in general and kind of how things should be designed. You really want the owners of the assets to be the users of the platform, and so by removing kind of the overly speculative nature, I think there's a decent argument to be made that if you kind of reduce the transferability of these assets early on, and then kind of let the demand side of the game get fully built out, it creates a much more kind of calculated and sustained kind of economy where you design the economy with many levers in mind, but it's difficult to really account for the speculative component, and making sure that that's managed correctly is really important for the sustainability of these economies.
Gabby, wanted to jump to you as well. Then, obviously, we've seen a lot of backlash from the mainstream crowd, but obviously, you're spending a bunch of time on sort of the front lines with all of these scholars. Perhaps you could give us the sort of perspective from that side of things, and sort of what you're seeing in terms of the onboarding that Yield Guild's doing.
Yeah, sure. And before that, I want to build on something that Ian said. Like, one of the fundamental game design tenets is that incentives drive behavior. And we've seen a lot of this with the different crypto games, where we've seen liquidity both from like the core game economy itself and the speculative liquidity coming from tokenized assets, especially if these assets are available on on exchanges with high liquidity. So I think games themselves, now that they're looking at the model, what works, what doesn't, and how it evolves, they're tweaking and designing the design itself to be able to create specific touch points where they want to give the player the choice of liquidity. Sian was saying some of the assets are non-transferable or maybe even non-tokenized at the start. We're seeing this a lot more with the new games coming to market. So, for example, you're seeing a little bit more of kind of a merging of a free-to-play and tokenized or play-to-earn game design, where you want people to kind of progress through the game and give more value to the network before giving them a choice on taking value out. And you can see this with the player base that we're working with as well. I think there has been this mistaken notion that scholars come into the game are there primarily for extraction of assets. So what was doing was that people were using the choice presented in front of them and given a choice to take a tokenized asset, use it further in the game, or take it out for their wallet, maybe to trade for something else, use in their real life. And when players had nothing better to do with a tokenized asset, they decided to sell it either to Ether or to another asset or to fiat. So I think game designers now are really kind of learning from the lessons of the past year. Definitely with a kind of quick rise of Axie Infinity, and then the inflationary supply of SLP, and with other games that we've seen as well. So you're seeing games that are now very thoughtful on how they're doing their syncs. On the player side, it's been a kind of very interesting last 6 months as well. Of course, we've seen some churn from players who are primarily wanted to use playing the game for earnings. But at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of very strong community engagement from people who are here because they want to learn Web3, because they want to upskill themselves. People who were primarily gamers when they joined the community last year, taught themselves Web3, have become community helpers, mods, game ambassadors. Some of them have even been hired into game teams and the YGG itself. So we're still seeing a lot of very strong um, engagement from community. But yeah, that said, there's been a huge transition of that in the last like 6 to 8 months.
Awesome. And one of the things I'd also love to touch on is sort of what you're seeing on kind of like the esports side as well. I know that's there's some exciting plans on the Yield Guild front for that. But would be awesome if you could give an overview, because in particular when I jump back to Brooks afterwards with the PlayFi model that I think is super exciting for all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the major theses that we're working with is that esports and the guild model are merging and will be like the same thing in the next 5 years. If you look at what guilds are doing, it's rallying community together and basically providing community, bringing them to certain games, providing support for the different roles that people may play, whether you're a player or part of the guild, a content creator, or an esports team. We also have a very active esports team within YGG that is primarily playing Axie Origin now, but is also looking at other games that have the ability for esports. And I think we have to delve into the biggest difference between basically traditional or Web2 esports or Web3 esports. We've seen some large companies built in the traditional esports scene, covering the largest games in the world. However, a lot of the upside of esports is lost because they don't own anything on the games that they're covering, right? Like if you're playing a game like, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Fortnite, you can have the best teams in the world, but you don't have any upside. And that, I feel like, is the beauty of Web3 esports. I'm spending a lot of time, for example, with our esports team, training the best people, providing content and bringing more people in the game. And it's a game that the guild itself is invested in as well. And I think this is just a better and sustainable model where both game and the guild are really working together to make the ecosystem much better. So this is something of a trend that we'll see continue for the next few years.
Awesome. And Brooks, perhaps you could jump in and give us an overview of sort of what these competitive game loops can look like under the PlayFi model, because I know many of the plans you guys are working on really sort of accentuates that competitive spirit and kicks things up a gear.
Well, yeah, and I think we can actually just dive off of everything that's been said so far, because one of the great challenges, or I should say, actually, one of the brilliant things about crypto is as we sit here and we talk about games, we talk about all of these things that we're talking about in the same parlance and same language of games as something like, for example, Dota, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Rocket League, and we put all of these under one gigantic tent. And I think what we've learned over the last 3 years, or what I've learned and what I think PlayFi sort of has been birthed out of, is an understanding that we shouldn't be putting everything together under one giant tent, that different types of games exist in the same way we may have subgenres of different things. But at the very top, we have new types of games that have been being made over the last few years that, prior to this were more, gray or black market, as was said earlier. They're meta games. And that's really what all of these games are that we're talking about. They're meta games. They're very different than what has traditionally been called infra games, or what we call traditional games, where people are reactive, where people are in the moment, where they're not actually dealing with the investment or possibilities or what ownership means, or caring about whether or not their gun is their gun. That's a thing that happens after a round, not necessarily in it. And with PlayFi, we really want to take a step back and go, when we talk about sports again, and esports specifically, there are meta games and games being played all the time that it's necessary for us to find a way to integrate in a way of strength that doesn't take over. All of us who are in this, who came up especially through the free-to-play world, came through a sort of Frankensteinian nightmare that free-to-play is, where not only do players not own anything, games companies have exceptionally centralized power, but on top of it, game developers are sort of more, the old joke of, I started a free-to-play games company, which means I built an analytics company. You have very few designers and a ton of data people. It puts everyone in these really awful positions where, as was said earlier, people can't break into mobile games anymore. The idea of a Flappy Bird these days is a flash in the pan. You need so much money in order to compete, even at a base level, even if your core game loop is good. Talk about game loops or meta games, or how crypto plays into it. The strength of crypto is in how the metagame can not only be strengthened, but can be explosive. The fact that these items, instead of being stuck within a small game economy, which is the traditional sort of free-to-play setup, oh, this skin is good, I'll trade you for that skin. If you've ever been on a Dota or Counter-Strike board, you may have seen those things. The exchange there happens within people who are interested in the game. It means a very tiny market, very, very small market. But traditional games in the sports sort of category, and what crypto enables, is a global reality. I have teams of that are in countries I've never even visited because of the nature of that. So the ability for crypto to actually take these elements, make them global, make this marketplace strong, and then, in the opinion of PlayFi, ultimately sort of strengthen and ramify the space where a literal game is being played, gives metagamers, which is the games we've been talking about here, and gamers, which are the traditional sort of Twitch reactive, short round, now imminent moment of gaming, chances to play together in a way where they both are strengthened.
Love it. Yeah, very, very much looking forward to all of that coming to life. Amy, wanted to kick it back to you and sort of ask what some of the themes that you're excited about and tracking are at the moment. What's sort of next for this sector? What have you got your eye on?
Well, from an investment angle, I would say that there's kind of been two categories of companies that we've been partnering with. One is like, indie studios that are building, that are, experienced entrepreneurs like that has built games before, who are building out a new studio. A lot of these guys are coming out of, like Riot and Blizzard and some other, places of where there's a lot of talent. And the other category would be actually the more established gaming studios that are creating Web3 studios within their parent company, and so I'm pretty excited about working with both, because I think it's like kind of uncertain to us like where the next hit. And I mean, I think that's kind of like as a gaming investor for many years, this has been long like a big question. It's hard to predict, where that is, but we typically are looking for people that are fairly experienced in building games, but then also are looking to embed sort of Web3 elements in it in pretty creative ways.
Awesome, yeah. Jiho, wanted to get your perspective on that similar topic. Some of the things that you're sort of tracking and excited by.
Well, yeah, I think that sustainable gotcha as a way of burning tokens, right? And just as Gabby mentioned, increasing the surface area of verbs that you can actually do with these tokens once you acquire them in the game. I think this is a very natural next step and an awesome narrative that will emerge, right? It's like basically a competition for who can create the most compelling burn mechanisms and sinks in these virtual economies. I think the rise of esports in Web3 is awesome, right? Like smart contracts enable automated payouts to hundreds of thousands, millions of people, right? We did a payout to 300,000 people in season 21 of Axie Classic, right? That's just something that doesn't work in the, I don't know, old world, right? Like you have nightmares of players that don't get paid, and this is a clear solution. So I think, yeah, the two things that I'm tracking is, right, the rise and democratization of esports through Web3 and smart contracts, and yeah, like this race, this kind of arms race to compelling burn mechanisms, right? And to me, a lot of it is going to focus on, okay, what does Supercell do to burn gems, right? Like that's just very simple. Like gems, you could totally tokenize gems and they would have a value. In fact, I'm the person who plays like Clash Royale and Clash of Clans and never sells my gems. It's actually stupid. Like if I when I log in, I literally have thousands of gems, maybe tens of thousands that have been stored up over the years, because my nature as a human being is that these things, because I buy them from Supercell, I can calculate the dollar cost of them. I should be able to sell them. They're worth something, and that makes me actually want to I feel like giving them back to Supercell when I don't have the opportunity to do other things with them, it just doesn't make sense. So I think just like looking at like how do traditional game developers burn gems, how do teams like CCP balance their economies? I think that's the path forward, and to me, it's just things that require engineering and product resources and time to kind of marinate and simmer.
Brooks, have you got a perspective on that? I feel like there's a few things touched on there that will be of interest to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to, and it's one of the things that I know I get accused of FUD and all kinds of stuff in this space, and I'm hardly that. I actually adore the ethos of crypto. I very much love it, but I think there's a reality to traditional gaming, the massive space and the players that are in it, and the people that we've been able to attract to crypto. Again, the way crypto pulls people is it pulls people who are either whales from the traditional free-to-play market or people who are prospective whales. There's a unique type of human being that plays games a very particular way. We call them metagamers when I talk about them. I try to separate them out. The ability for us to understand that those people play games very differently than people who are in it for just the moment. The need for us, and it's the reason that there's pushback against Ubisoft. There's a reason Microsoft did what they did with Minecraft. Well, with Minecraft, it was because Minecraft's a kid's game, and I kind of get that part at least. But with Ubisoft or with Dr. Disrespect, the traditional gamer wants to just jump in and gain skill. And skill is a habit over time that you sort of earn and have high skill ceilings for. And games that are designed for that, it is an exceptional experience. That thing being conflated with metagaming, that thing being sort of put into that other space, puts us in a spot where we start seeing where these things collide. And I go back to great examples of this with World of Warcraft's gray market with gold farming. The nature of gold farming within World of Warcraft showed that they needed to have sort of some kind of larger metagame. That the problem with gold is it was overly scarce, but the solution of gold farming just meant that there were entire sections of the game, because how it works is people go, hey, this is where I can go make money. So they sit and they just farm an entire area, ruins it for the people who aren't doing that. And then that gold gets then sold out, distributed to the rest of the economy. That setup can become incredibly dangerous to the infra game and the imminent game, to the point where, again, traditional gamers or the people who play those infra games are not going to be excited to sort of jump over. And it is it's a thing that we really
I don't
need to be very
understand.
careful of.
I actually played WoW like from the beginning, like vanilla. We sold spots in our raids to like Chinese gold farming operations, but I don't understand how it ruined the experience for anybody in the ecosystem, right? Because the key was also like the end game gear was always like you have to earn it through skilled gameplay, right? You couldn't actually trade that gold for things that you right like needed to be able to excel in the PvP or the PvE endgame.
Right, because they specifically built in things in order to prevent that. That's the reason it wasn't transferable, is specifically because they didn't want people to hoard gold and then purchase those items. That was like a design choice that was made. That they made that call. If you were playing and you were running through areas, there were a handful of spaces that gold farmers absolutely used that had the highest efficiency rate for actually being able to gather gold, and they would just be farmed. So if you were one of those people who was leveling up or going through one of those areas, there were entire sections of quests that were blocked off that you'd have to call a game master. Game master would come in, block those people, actually generally ban them, and then you'd be able to finally farm the 6, 7, 10 mobs you need in order to complete the handful of quests in order to move on through the area. That setup broke WoW. That's one of the reasons that they ended up doing what they did to sort of get around a great deal of that. Gold farming also, because of the nature of how it operates, became a non-profitability pretty quick over time. That, I think, exercise is one of those things where I say, the reason people play games, like what pushes them into it. Someone said earlier that incentives drive activity. Well, let's talk about what the incentives are for the different types of players. Players are not a monolithic group. None of us here are a monolithic group. Understanding incentives and the desire of why people actually join, I think, is going to be central to us finding a way that crypto and all these elements can work together in order to truly change gaming, because I think all of us see that gaming is broken as an industry right now, and our need to sort of find ways to fix this, to give players that actual ownership, to give players ways of generating currency, to give players and metagamers especially ways of actually being able to become empowered in these spaces. I think crypto is the solution for that, and we just have to really be thoughtful about that.
Aaron, I suspect you'll probably have something to add here as well. Curious for your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I find really inspiring about this space that I think is different from the traditional game space is the very rapid and open experimentation that's occurring. The idea that a lot of game devs get their start releasing a white paper and being kind of very transparent and open about what they're attempting to build, the design of their economies, et cetera. And then obviously once they go live, even if a decent chunk of stuff is off chain, you're still seeing on chain data. And I think it's going to allow us to all collectively progress as a space a lot more rapidly than in the kind of traditional game world where everything's very siloed and you're not going to see, WB release a white paper on the next Game of Thrones title, right? That's just not happening. And so I find that very inspiring. I think it will help us all move forward a lot quicker. Eventually, someone will hit on a model that has sustainability, and at that point, I think we'll see a lot of game devs begin to adopt that. I like that this group is very focused on trying to define the target gamer here, and I think it is really important to acknowledge again that like this is not. These type of games are not necessarily going to be for every gamer. I think the hardest route is trying to go get the AAA crowd to adopt NFTs. But I come back again to free to play. Here we have a mobile free to play. We have $100 billion annual industry where less than 5% of the player base, and that's a pretty high number, actually spends money in titles. You have this massive misalignment of incentives in that industry where a developer is trying to squeeze and monetize this very small percentage of the population and retain as many free to play players as possible with the ultimate desire of converting them. And I think in the Web3 space, the alignment of incentives is far, far greater. And again, I think it's a real threat to the free-to-play industry, which is massive and the largest segment of gaming at this point. And those type of gamers, I think, are going to be the easiest to onboard into this space. And it's really where I think our focus lies. And I think is a smart direction for developers to take versus the route of how do we get to mass market today, which I think is going to be a more of an uphill battle and a struggle on that front.
I agree that like trying to make a AAA game is like playing playing this space on hard mode, right? Like
Definitely,
I think like all the games that have said that so far have been like massive catastrophes, right? Like I think back to Gods Unchained and 2018 and 2019, like basically trying to play up that narrative, never even doing the tournament. So been the case so far, at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's going to be a real struggle, and I think game developers who are entering the space need to make that choice. Who am I going after? And again, I think the free-to-play mobile gamer, particularly the spender segment of that market, is probably the easiest to onboard into this space as a starting point.
Oh, and that's essentially my argument, is that the whales of traditional free-to-play games are metagamers. They are, and I've gotten to know quite a few. We have there's Axie people who have spent an enormous amount of time trying to understand and build out that game, and there's YouTube videos where they talk about this strat versus that, or how to scholarship program here, and how to manage all your people. And it's kind of it's and it's not to demean it. It's like watching people talk about managing entire sports organizations and companies and corporations, all the way through to games like Illuvium that's running into the same thing. You see people who are treating this like a business, and I believe whales are the metagamers that have been basically exploited by the traditional free-to-play industry, but also the gamers underneath that who have been kind of wedged in effectively as content for the whales. That's the old sort of joke, is that whales exist, we're trying to milk as much money out of them. You come here, you get to be content, so that way the people we're tricking into thinking they're good at the game by spending money, we need them to beat the shit out of you, so you get to be a sacrifice for them. Is this, I think, awful thing. awful thing. And our ability within crypto is to give those whales their proper place, which is as business people. That's what they are. Like, they're the capitalist, they're the business person, they're the person who likes playing those games of strategy and thought and market. And by moving them into a spot where they have that power without destroying the sort of traditional infra game or sports space inside of the arena, I think is exceptionally powerful. Again, crypto has so much potential for that.
Well, absolutely. And just to piggyback off that quickly, like whales in particular, from free to play, are used to buying things to accelerate progress. And we like to think about it as whales will pay grinders for things that they've grind. I went and got this, or I got this piece of armor, and I'm going to sell it to a whale that wants that progress and wants to move forward. And that can create a healthy, sustainable economy, particularly when there's a middle class of players in between that are somewhere on that spectrum from whale to grinder. So couldn't agree more.
Yeah, no, and you see this fascinating behavior with whales in the traditional free-to-play space, and you see it. I think crypto, we may call them degens or whatever, but the crypto space is filled with them. People in free-to-play who spend a shit ton of money, they actually tend not to brag about being the best at the game. It's not really what you see. Instead, they talk about how efficiently and smartly they spent their money. And it's not even like they throw down money and they go, hey, look, I spent $1 million, I'm better than you. It's, oh no, do you see, I'm playing on the Korean version specifically of Diablo Immortal because I get an extra blah, blah, blah. And it's that kind of bragging about that skill set that I think crypto excels at enabling. And there's so much power there.
I think also like one thing that humans want, right, more so than running a business, right, is like, I mean, running a business is one way to achieve this, right? But I think like one of the things that drives us is recognition. And I think what we're seeing in Web3, like in Axie, right, like the whales, the people who have the most assets, they're all quite famous, right? They're like Axie celebrities within the community, and they're beloved by the community in a lot of ways, right? And so you go to these events, meetups and stuff, and people don't want to meet me, they want to meet right? Like Coco, right? Like the anonymous whales, even like there's like a mythology, and they have their own lore. They become part of this part of the game, and I think that's much more enabled.
Oh God,
through crypto assets.
Completely. The amazing part about that Axie, I think, really exposed is there's even two sides to even that bit, where you have people who are like the celebrities, but there are clearinghouses almost of sort of faceless people who people don't care about, who just own a ton of Axies, that the community actually has a little bit of animosity with the way they behave, because it's not so much for the celebrities that they own a ton. It's what they've done, how they've done, their thinking behind. The same way you might have a worship for an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs, who sort of is thoughtful and interesting and does things a certain way, versus someone like maybe a more hardcore, I guess, gross version of that definitely does exist. So I think there's a really fascinating play again that is happening within the metagame of Axie that a lot of other crypto projects are utilizing, and that again goes back to that idea of the whales and of old being given the right tools, being given this ownership, have just an exceptionally large amount of power inside of the space.
Yeah, it's been super interesting to hear both perspectives here. We've kind of acknowledged that different models are sort of suited to different genres, and within each of these models anyway, there's a sort of degree of monetization as well. Gabby, given a lot of your guild's activity revolves specifically around this sort of like earn centricity around these games, would love to get your perspective on this too.
Sure. So I represent the guild. I also come from the class of players who weren't whales to start with. We had to use our kind of time and effort and skill and passion in these games and use it to eventually earn and own assets in the game. And this is something that we are, I would say, representing to the rest of the guild. People who want to trade their time and skill and level up and contribute to these virtual economies and receive assets in exchange, which may represent value. So this is guilds have been in games for, I would say, over 2 decades now, and you see them active in WoW, you see them active in RuneScape, you see them active in EVE, in Clash Royale. So it's really interesting to see, like, what does a guild represent in Web3 gaming, in blockchain games. And generally, when I look at a functional game economy, what I see is a virtual economy. And then what I'm most passionate about is enabling people to find their certain skill set, the jobs that they can bring, whether you're a grinder, a trader, a creator, a professional athlete in esports, and using that and parlaying it into basically owning your own assets inside of these virtual economies.
Absolutely. Amy, I wanted to give you the opportunity to jump in. I don't know if you had anything to add on here, Amy or Jan.
No, one kind of element that I definitely want to touch on was kind of briefly mentioned before was the impact of farming and whether or not that kind of poisons the well of the game. I think it's not necessarily binary, but it kind of really boils down to the distance between the farming component and the end game achievable assets or kind of raids or whatever it might be. And so, ensuring that it's not purely buy asset from farm and then easily get to this end state, but basically make it so that there's still this massive amount of achieving and work and grind and play that and kind of skill that needs to take place and happen for you to actually get to that end state. And so I think that kind of distinction is what still helps kind of create a lot of meaning and importance for the players that are getting to the end state versus the games that allow them to get there just purely through financial means.
I totally agree with that, and I'd go one step further that this is table stakes for a gaming team, right? It's literally about economy balancing and being able to segment your users and map out like the player journey from kind of onboarding to grind to like eventually getting to end state and maximizing like kind of LTV per player. And I would say that like all of the experience, like mobile free to play, like game makers know how to balance this, and it is probably one of the most one of the biggest indicators of success to how like big a game can get. You could potentially have a hit in your hands, but if you don't know how to operate that game in this kind of like monetization model, it's not going to become like a 500 million or $1 billion franchise. And so like I think that's why like it's really important. I think game economist is probably and systems designer. These are two of the hardest roles to hire for a gaming company, and it's one of the reasons why we always ask like who is that on your team, because I think without that it's pretty difficult.
Well, it's incredibly so. The idea of endgame itself and how it has been sort of shifted over time is itself fascinating because again, it works into this how a metagamer plays a game versus the infra game. When the idea of why stats increase as you get like higher level inside of Diablo or World of Warcraft was originally intended simply to simulate the fact that over time, as we practice, we get better. If I go out and I were to actually be a rogue as I did things, if I didn't die, and granted I'd probably be terrible, but over time I would just be better at it as I practice. Some people would be exceptionally good. That's the nature of simulating critical hits. D&D started as a way to simulate these things via dice rolls. Over time, that has kind of shifted into making the numbers the primacy instead of the skill behind them they're intended to simulate. And as we've gotten to that point, in-game has basically become a chase of trying to find that way that we have a higher and higher skill ceiling that fits something like, for example, Rocket League, where the supposed numbers you'd have behind it for some of these people is insane, as people do incredibly difficult moves that are incredibly well practiced that mimics real sports. As we start talking about that in game and we start talking about how players can interface with it and how it works, that infra game element, if we can find a way to allow those like traditional sports to be exceptionally high skill ceilings and then actually move over to the economy side and the metagame and allow that growth, they can actually stand side by side exceptionally well. And it's a very powerful thing.
Love that. Guys, we've also just pinned a tweet here with a report that the gaming team dropped this week, which touches on many of these topics. So highly recommend everyone checks that out. But given we're coming up on time here, wanted to ask each of the panelists here, what's your sort of mega bull case for crypto gaming? Sort of can be on a 5 to 10 year horizon, whatever you fancy. Like, what's everyone else missing here? Gabby, perhaps we'll start with you.
It's going well. Everyone really thinks that this is going to be a way to onboard billions of people into crypto, but I think that this is going to upskill people from around the world that don't have a lot of good local opportunities, and the jobs that you're going to generate around these virtual economies is what's going to allow crypto to grow. So it's not just about the whales or people who are paying their way in. The people who are actually upskilling themselves and joining these economies is what's going to fill up these virtual worlds.
One of the cool things, right, to that, Gabby, right, is like I love it when I see people who came into the ecosystem as scholars and then, right, they end up helping a lot with the guerrilla content marketing, right? Like they're entering these animation contests, these art contests. They're becoming YouTubers and streamers, right? So there's and even developers, right? So yeah, they're finding awesome ways to become part of the community and learn, and they're learning these really concrete skills that end up adding to the power and the strength of the network.
Aaron, maybe we'll kick it over to you. What's your gaming bull case here?
Yeah, I mean, I come back to, listen, free to play is $100 billion a year industry. It has terrible misalignment between developer and player. Web3 gaming creates this far better alignment of incentives between the developers and the players. And that's ultimately around allowing players to capture the majority of the very value that they create by coming into these experiences and again, participating and kind of actively building them together. And so I think it eats a huge chunk of free to play and adds a few $100 billion onto it over the next, let's say 5 years. And that's certainly where we've aligned ourselves and a bet that I'm pretty confident in placing.
Amy, would love to kick it over to you and get your perspective.
Yeah, I think, this will take time and patience. I think some people out there are like, oh, Web3 games are dead. I think that was a narrative that, Jonathan from A16 was addressing. It's so short-sighted of a comment, that I honestly think anyone who says that, like, doesn't know much about the gaming industry and, like, kind of the cycles and lengths of time it takes for new trends to be adopted. And so, yeah, we're super, bullish, but, it's early and it does take, like, really, like, hits out there to start, like, converting people from skeptics to believers. And so, we're all kinda grinding until then.
Awesome. And Brooks, would love to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think the next 6 months are going to be fascinating, let alone the next few years. I look back at the last few years of crypto. I've only been sort of consulting in the space for 3 to 4, but in that time, the space we're at now is almost hilariously unpredictable from where we were at just the year of watching Axie grow and explode into play to earn as a feasible reality, and how to build the steps that are coming next as more people are building on top of that and standing on the shoulders of those giants. Two of them are here, granted. The ability for us to see who's the next giant that someone else is going to build on top of, because in the crypto space, it seems things evolve at almost hilariously fast rate in comparison. And I'm saying that as someone who, I'm a Tribeca winning VR director, and on top of that, I did social media and brought multiple companies to the cloud. I've been at the touch of tech. I've never seen anything like how fast crypto evolves, ever. It's amazing, and I cannot wait to see where we go.
I love it. I think that energy and excitement is shared by all of us here. Guys and girls, thank you all for hopping on. It's been a really, really awesome session. Really enjoyed the conversation, and for those listening in, once again, we've dropped that link to the tweet with the new report that Delphi's just dropped. So would love for people to check it out. Yeah, panelists, thank you once again, and yeah, we'll have to do another in time.
Thanks, Spears. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Pierce,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you. Fun.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And do check out the report. Granted, I'm partial, but do check out the report.
Good man. Thanks a lot, Brooks. Bye bye.